The thunderbolt splits the sky, and Bellerophon is falling. His hands reach upward toward Pegasus, but the divine horse climbs higher, leaving him to drop through endless clouds. Above him, Pegasus beats his wings toward Olympus, toward the home Bellerophon will never reach. The mortal screams, but gods do not answer falling men. This is how the greatest hero of Corinth ends, rejected by heaven, abandoned by his immortal companion. But the fall took only moments. The rise took years. What kind of man tries to storm the home of gods? What victory could feel so hollow that heaven itself seemed the only prize worth claiming? Bellerophon had slain the Chimera. He had conquered armies. He had married a princess and ruled a kingdom. Still, he looked upward. Still, he wanted more. The Greeks knew this sickness well. They had a word for a hubris. The pride that makes mortals forget they are mortal. Tonight, we trace how it bloomed. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow. Find your warmth. This is a story the ancient Greeks told to explain why even heroes have limits. If you drift off before Bellerophon reaches the clouds, that's fine. The gods are patient. They've watched over sleeping mortals since the world began. Our story begins in Corinth, the wealthy city between two seas, where a young prince's trembling hands are covered in his brother's blood. The death was an accident, a hunting spear thrown wrong, a cry cut short. But accident or not, Bellerophon had killed his own kin. He could not stay. Ancient law demanded exile for kinslayers, even princes, even those who wept and begged forgiveness. Blood demanded distance. Bellerophon had to flee. He traveled to Tiryns, where King Pegasus ruled behind walls built by giants. There, the exiled prince sought purification, a ritual cleansing of his blood guilt. Protus welcomed him, performed the rites, invited him to stay as honored guest. For 9 days Bellerophon ate at the king's table, grateful and healing. But the queen was watching. Antea saw this handsome exile prince and felt something stir that had nothing to do with hospitality. She came to him in the night. Her words were honey and fire. Her offer was everything a lonely exile might dream of, and his complete destruction if discovered. Bellerophon refused, firmly, politely. He knew the laws of hospitality, the sacred bond between host and guest. To touch the queen would damn him forever. A woman scorned becomes a weapon. By morning, Antea was weeping before her husband, claiming Bellerophon had attacked her. The lie was flawless. The trap was set. Pegasus could not kill a guest directly. The gods punished such violations. But he had a father-in-law in distant Lycia, and a sealed letter could travel far. Bellerophon walked east toward Lycia, carrying the sealed letter like a gift. He did not know that inside, King Pegasus had written 3 words: "Kill this man." The journey took weeks. Through mountain passes and coastal towns, past temples and olive groves. Each night he slept under stars, dreaming of redemption ahead. Lycia rose from the mountains like a hidden kingdom. King Iobates ruled there. Antea's father, though Bellerophon did not know this connection yet. The king received him warmly. A guest from Tiryns deserved proper hospitality. For 9 days, Iobates feasted Bellerophon before even asking his business. Only on the 10th day did Iobates break the seal. His face changed as he read. His daughter's husband demanded death. But this young man had eaten his bread. To kill a guest who had shared his table, the gods would never forgive such violation. But to ignore his son-in-law's command would mean war. The king needed another way. There was something in the mountains that killed everyone sent against it. A monster born of monsters, the Chimera. Let the beast do what the king could not. Iobates summoned Bellerophon with honey in his voice. A great hero, surely, could help with a small problem. A beast troubling the countryside, nothing too dangerous. The young exile accepted eagerly. Here was his chance, not just survival, but glory. He would slay this monster and return a hero. He had no idea what waited in those mountains. That night, doubt crept in. Bellerophon had heard whispers in the market. No one returns from the Chimera's mountain. Warriors, armies, all burned to ash. A lion's head that breathes fire. A serpent for a tail. a goat's head rising from its spine. 3 mouths, all hungry. How does a man with a sword fight that? He went to the local temple to pray. Any god who would listen. Any divine ear that might offer guidance. The priest spoke of a seer in the city, Polyados, who saw what others could not. Polyados was ancient beyond counting. His eyes had gone white with prophecy decades ago, but he saw further than any mortal with sight. He knew Bellerophon was coming. The seer spoke before Bellerophon could ask. You seek the chimera's death, you will find it. But not with sword alone. You need what the gods ride. Pegasus. The winged horse born from Medusa's blood when Perseus cut her head. Immortal, untamable, wild as wind. He drinks at Corinth's sacred spring. He belongs to no mortal. But how does a mortal tame the untamable? Polyados smiled his eyeless smile. Sleep in Athena's temple tonight. The goddess of wisdom chooses her champions carefully. That night Bellerophon laid his head on the temple's stone floor. Cold seeped into his bones. Sleep seemed impossible. Then the goddess came. Athena appeared not as a vision but as a presence. Gray eyes filling the world, wisdom older than mountains, power that could reshape fate itself. She held something golden in her hands, a bridle, but no ordinary bridle. This was forged on Olympus, blessed by Poseidon himself. With this, Pegasus would submit. Go to Corinth, the goddess commanded. Find the spring called Pyrene where the winged one drinks at dawn. Approach with courage but not pride. The horse will know the difference. Bellerophon woke with gold in his hands. The bridle was real, solid, warm, humming with power. The dream had crossed into waking. The gods had chosen him. He did not return to the palace. Did not explain to King Iobates where he was going. He simply walked west, toward Corinth, toward the spring, toward a destiny he could finally see. Back in Corinth nothing had changed. The same white temples, the same twin harbors. But Bellerophon had changed. He was no longer the prince who fled in shame. He did not visit his family's home. Did not seek out old friends. He went straight to the spring of Pyrene, where clear water bubbled from ancient rock. He waded through the night, hidden among the olive trees, watching the moonlit water, clutching the golden bridle. His heart pounded so loud he feared the horse would hear. Dawn painted the sky gold and rose. Then he heard them wing beats, not like any bird, deeper, slower, the sound of impossible flight approaching. Pegasus descended from the clouds like a falling star, white as fresh snow. Wings wider than any ship's sail, eyes golden and knowing, older than civilizations. The horse lowered his head to drink. Every instinct screamed at Bellerophon to rush forward. But Athena's warning echoed. Approach with courage, not pride. He waited. Slowly, he stepped from the trees. Slowly, he approached. The horse raised his head, those golden eyes fixed on Bellerophon and on the bridle in his hands. Pegasus did not flee, did not attack. He stood perfectly still, nostrils flaring, reading this mortal's soul, testing him without words. The moment stretched eternal. Then Pegasus lowered his great head. The wild, untamable creature born from a monster's blood bent his neck toward the bridle. He had chosen his rider. Bellerophon mounted for the first time. The horse's back was warm as summer stone. Then wings spread, muscles gathered, and the ground fell away beneath them. They soared over Corinth, over the temples, the harbors, the home he had fled in shame. From up here, his old life looked small. His future looked infinite. For 3 days they flew together, learning each other. The horse anticipated Bellerophon's thoughts. The man learned to trust the divine wings beneath him. But this was not play. There was a monster waiting in Lycia, breathing fire, hungry for another hero's bones. Soon, they would have to face it together. On the 4th day they turned east, toward Lycia, toward the mountain that smoked even in summer, toward the creature that had killed every warrior sent against it. They flew high above the land, invisible to those below. Farmers looked up, saw only a white shape against the clouds, and made signs against evil. They did not know they glimpsed hope. The mountain came into view first, a broken cone leaking smoke and sometimes flame. Around its base, nothing lived. The earth itself was scarred black, the Chimera's home. Bellerophon had brought more than the bridle from Corinth. A lance with a lead tip, soft metal that would melt in fire. A desperate plan for a desperate battle. They circled lower. The smoke thickened, and then, from a cave mouth like a wound in the mountain, something moved. 3 heads turned upward. 3 mouths opened, fire bloomed. The Chimera was everything the legends promised and worse. Larger than any natural beast. Fire pouring from 3 throats. Eyes that had watched heroes die for generations. The Greeks who first told this story understood something about heroes. Every gift comes with a shadow. Every strength contains the seed of destruction. Achilles was invincible, except for his heel. Heracles was strongest, but his rage destroyed his own family. Odysseus was cleverest, and his cleverness extended his suffering by years. Bellerophon's gift was sky itself, to ride where no mortal had ridden, to touch the realm of gods. But what happens when a man who can fly begins to think he belongs above? This was what the ancient listeners understood. They did not tell hero stories to worship perfection. They told them to map the territory where glory becomes destruction. So when we watch Bellerophon face the Chimera, we watch more than a battle. We watch a man earning the victory that will eventually convince him he deserves to be a god. The Chimera's fire reached upward. Pegasus banked hard and heat washed over them. Singing hair, scorching skin. One direct hit would end everything. They climbed out of range. Circled. The monster tracked them, patient as a cat with prey. It had time. Heroes always came down eventually. They always burned. From above, Bellerophon studied the beast. The lion head dominated. The goat head supported. But the serpent tail, it moved with separate intelligence. 3 minds, 3 threats. He would need to approach from behind. Let Pegasus's speed outpace the serpent's strike. Drive the lead lance deep into the lion's throat. 1 chance. Pegasus felt his rider's decision. Wings folded. They dove. The wind screamed past. The mountain rushed up. Behind them the sun. Before them death. The serpent tail struck first. Fangs like daggers slashing the air where they had been a heartbeat before. Pegasus twisted, and Bellerophon's arm drove forward. The lead tip entered the lion's roaring mouth, and kept going. The monster tried to breathe fire, but the lead melted, ran down its throat, and sealed the flame inside. The Chimera's scream was like nothing Bellerophon had heard. 3 voices in agony as fire found no exit. It stumbled, thrashed. The goat head bleated in confused pain. Pegasus climbed out of reach as the beast destroyed itself. Fire burst from seams in its hide. Smoke poured from its eyes. The monster fell. It took hours to die. The earth shook with its final thrashing. Trees that had survived its fire fell from the tremors. Then, at last, silence. Bellerophon landed beside the corpse. It still radiated heat. The lion's eyes were open, locked in final fury. He had done what armies could not. He had killed the unkillable. He took a trophy. A single claw from the lion's paw, large as a dagger. Proof. When he returned to Lycia, there would be no doubt. The Chimera Slayer had arrived. They flew back to King Iobates' palace. The king was at dinner when Bellerophon walked in, covered in ash and blood, carrying a claw the size of a sword. Iobates dropped his cup. Wine spread across the table like blood. This was impossible. The boy should be dead. Instead, he stood there with proof of victory over a legend. The court erupted. Nobles who had quietly expected Bellerophon's death now cheered his triumph. The Chimera Slayer. A new hero. The king smiled and planned his next murder. If the Chimera could not kill him, perhaps men could. There was a tribe in the mountains. The Salimi. Fierce warriors who had never been conquered. Let them try. The king spoke of raiders troubling the border. Would the great hero mind? A small matter for someone who had slain the Chimera. Bellerophon accepted without suspicion. The Salimi were not monsters, they were men. But men bred for war since birth. Their arrows flew thick enough to darken the sky. Their blades never missed. But arrows cannot catch a winged horse at speed. Pegasus dove through the volleys, and Bellerophon struck from angles no ground force could defend against. From above, he saw their formations, their ambush points, their commanders. Each dive scattered their lines. Each pass left more warriors fleeing than fighting. By the third day, the Solymi begged for peace. Their greatest fighters lay dead on mountain slopes. Their chiefs sent messengers with surrender offerings. The unconquerable conquered. Bellerophon returned to Lycia again. Again Iobates hid his horror behind praise. 2 impossible tasks completed. There was one more weapon left to throw at this hero. The Amazons. Warrior women from beyond the edges of the Greek world. They had never lost to a man. Their queen had killed kings with her own hands. Iobates sent word ahead secretly. A hero comes. He killed the Chimera. He broke the Solymi, kill him, and prove Amazon's strength still exceeds any man's. Bellerophon flew into their territory expecting diplomacy. He found 100 arrows and 100 war cries. The Amazons had been warned. The Amazons were ready. But the Solymi had been fierce warriors too. The Chimera had been invincible too. Bellerophon had learned from each battle. He knew now what Pegasus could do. He fought not to destroy them, but to dishearten them. Taking their banners. Scattering their horses. Showing that no arrow could touch him, no trap could hold him. The Amazon queen challenged him to single combat. Bellerophon descended, dismounted, faced her on foot. If he could fight as a man, he would prove men could match them. They fought until both blood. She was faster, he was stronger. She nearly killed him twice. But when dawn came, it was the queen who knelt in the dust. He let her live. The Amazons let him leave. There was honor between warriors, even in defeat. The hero returned to Lycia for the 3rd time, and the king ran out of monsters. Iobates had one final plan, a simple ambush with 50 soldiers, but even that failed. Bellerophon scattered them like leaves. The king finally understood. The gods protected this man. King Iobates summoned Bellerophon to his private chamber. No guards, no courtiers. Just an old king who had tried 3 times to murder an innocent man. Iobates held out the letter, the sealed tablet from Pegasus. His hands trembled, his voice cracked. The truth, finally, would be spoken between them. "Read it," the king whispered. "See what my son-in-law commanded. See what I tried to do. And know that if the gods protect you this strongly, you must be innocent." Rage should have followed. Bellerophon had every right to vengeance. Instead, he set the letter down. The king was old. The truth was known. What good was more blood? Iobates wept. This young man he had tried to destroy now stood as his moral superior. The king fell to his knees before the hero and offered him everything. His daughter's hand in marriage. Not Antea, but Philano, the younger princess. Half his kingdom now. All of it when he died. Bellerophon would be heir to Lycia. Philano was not her sister. Where Antea burned with hungry fire, Philano radiated gentle warmth. She had watched this hero from afar and found hope in his survival. Their wedding filled Lycia with celebration. The monster slayer married the gentle princess. Bards sang of the union. Common people danced in streets for days. For a time Bellerophon knew peace. A wife who loved him. A kingdom that honored him. Children came, strong sons, beautiful daughters. What more could any man desire? But Pegasus remained. The divine horse grazed in royal stables, though no stable truly held him. He stayed because he chose to, and every day, Bellerophon remembered what flight felt like. Sometimes at night they still flew together, over sleeping Lycia, over moonlit mountains. The prince who could walk among men chose instead to soar above them. Years passed. Iobates grew weaker. The day came when Bellerophon stood beside the dying king, receiving his final blessing and the full weight of the crown. King Bellerophon. The words fit strangely on a tongue that had once begged for purification from kinslaying, from exile to throne, from shame to glory. He ruled well. Justice flowed from his court. Trade prospered. Enemies learned that threatening Lycia meant facing a king who rode the sky itself. But something gnawed at him. A hunger that grew with each triumph. He had everything mortals could want. Why did it feel like so little? At night, He dreamed of Olympus, not as distant clouds, but as halls he could see, feasts he could smell, gods he could almost touch. The dreams felt like invitations. After all, he had killed the chimera, conquered the unconquerable, married a princess, ruled a kingdom. What separated him from the gods now? Only altitude. Pegasus could reach Olympus. The horse was born divine after all, he belonged there. And if Pegasus could go, surely he could carry his rider with him. The thought grew from whisper to roar, from midnight fancy to obsession. He had earned this. The gods owed him recognition. He would take his seat among them. Philano saw the change in him. Her husband spent more time with Pegasus than with her. He spoke of Olympus at dinner. He called mortal life a prison. She tried to reach him, reminded him of their children, their kingdom, their life. He heard the words but could not feel them. Mortality had become a coat too small. His children sensed something wrong. Their father, once warm and present, now looked through them as if they were ghosts. They clung to their mother and wondered what they had done. The court noticed too. Their king, once decisive, now seemed distracted. Judgments went unmade. Petitioners waited days. The hero was looking somewhere they could not follow. He began preparing in earnest, checking Pegasus's wings for any weakness, planning the route upward, studying the patterns of clouds that veiled Olympus. Pegasus grew restless under this scrutiny. The horse had always flown willingly with his rider. But there was something in Bellerophon's eyes now that troubled even divine instinct. But the golden bridle still bound them. Athena's gift still compelled the horse's obedience. Pegasus could feel doubt, but he could not refuse, not while the bridle held. In the temples, priests began to whisper warnings. The gods were watching. They did not appreciate mortals who forgot their place. But Bellerophon no longer visited temples. On Olympus, Zeus watched. The king of gods had seen this pattern before. Mortals elevated by fortune who began to think fortune was their right. It always ended the same way. Athena felt differently. She had given Bellerophon the bridle. She had helped make him what he became. If he fell now, some part of his fall was her responsibility. She appeared to him one final time, not in dreams but in waking light, standing before him in full divine glory. A warning. A last chance to turn back. Turn back, she commanded. You were given gifts, do not confuse gifts for rights. Olympus is not for mortals. Even mortals who ride immortal horses. Bellerophon listened. But the hunger had grown too strong. He had been chosen. He had been given power. Now the goddess wanted to keep him down. Even she was jealous. He spoke words no mortal should speak to a goddess. Dismissive words. Proud words. Athena's face went cold, and she vanished without reply. The last bridge burned. That night he told Philano. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow I fly to Olympus. Tomorrow I take my rightful place. She should be proud. She was married to a future god. She begged. She wept. She threw herself at his feet and clutched his robes. Their children woke to their mother's screams and added their own. He barely heard them. Dawn came too quickly. Bellerophon walked to the stables where Pegasus waited. The horse's eyes held no welcome now. Only ancient resignation. Even Pegasus knew what was coming. Bellerophon mounted one last time. The golden bridle gleamed in morning light. He did not look back at the palace, at his family, at the mortal life he was leaving behind. Wings spread, hooves left the ground. Pegasus climbed into morning sky, higher than they had ever flown together, toward the clouds that hid Olympus from mortal sight. Below, Philano watched until they disappeared into clouds. Her children pressed against her. Somewhere above, her husband was flying toward his death. She could only pray. Through the clouds they flew, past the altitude where mortal lungs should fail, past the boundary where sky becomes something else. And still Bellerophon commanded upward. He could see it now. Not imagination, reality. Golden towers breaking through the highest clouds. Divine light that was no sun. Olympus, home of the gods, within reach. His heart soared even as his mount labored. Soon he would walk those halls, drink that nectar, sit among the deathless ones who had guided his fortune. He had earned this. Zeus rose from his throne. The mortal had passed the last warning, had crossed the final boundary. The king of gods raised his hand, and a thunderbolt answered. The light was blinding. The sound was everything. The thunderbolt did not strike Bellerophon. It struck the space between him and Pegasus. Divine bond, severed by divine force. Pegasus screamed and reared. The golden bridle shattered into 1,000 pieces. Suddenly free, the immortal horse did what his instincts demanded, fled toward Olympus, toward home. And Bellerophon fell, not struck dead, worse, alive, awake, feeling every moment of the endless drop through clouds that had seemed like stairs to heaven. Above him, Pegasus grew smaller. Below him, the earth waited. The fall took so long he had time to understand exactly what he had done, what he had lost. His kingdom, his wife, his children, his glory, all of it traded for a glimpse of golden towers that would never welcome him. Pride had made him blind. Now sight returned too late. He did not die. Zeus could have granted him that mercy. Instead, Bellerophon crashed through branches and tumbled across hard earth. Broken, but alive. The cruelest punishment of all. To the ancient Greeks, Pegasus was not simply a magical horse. He was a symbol of poetry, of inspiration, of the divine spark that lifts human spirits toward impossible heights. When Pegasus's hoof struck Mount Helicon, the spring of the Muses burst forth. Every poem, every song, every act of human creativity. Pegasus helped bring them into the world. But Pegasus was born from horror. Medusa's blood, Perseus's violence, a monster's death. The Greeks understood that beauty and terror often share the same source. Bellerophon received this gift of inspiration, rode it to glory. But then he tried to own what cannot be owned. Inspiration is loaned, never possessed. He forgot that truth. In the end, Pegasus returned to heaven and became a constellation. Still inspiring poets, still lifting spirits. But Bellerophon remained on earth, reminder that vessels can be emptied. Bellerophon woke alone in a wilderness he did not recognize. His legs were shattered. His ribs were broken. Every breath brought agony, but he was alive. Zeus's. He tried to stand, failed, tried again, fell. Bones ground against each other. Blood seeped from wounds that would not close properly. Somewhere above, Olympus glittered unconcerned. He crawled. Through thorn bushes and across sharp stones, looking for water, looking for shelter, looking for any sign that the world still cared whether he lived or died. This place was called the Alien Plain, a wasteland where nothing grew, where no travelers passed. The gods sent those they wished to forget to wander here forever. Days passed. His wounds partially healed, enough to walk, though with a terrible limp. Enough to survive, though survival felt more like punishment than mercy. He had no food except what he could scavenge. Roots, insects, the occasional dead animal left by other wanderers who had died before him, a king reduced to eating carrion. Water came from morning dew licked off stones, from rare puddles after rarer rains. His lips cracked, his throat burned, but death refused to take him. He thought of his family often, wondered if Philano believed him dead, if his children would grow up hating their father, if Lycia had found a better king. He could have tried to find his way home. The stars still guided travelers. But shame held him here more firmly than any chains. How could he face them? How could he explain? The man who had killed the Chimera now feared facing his own wife. The hero who had conquered armies could not conquer his own humiliation. Some wounds do not heal. Seasons turned. Or perhaps they didn't. The Alien Plain existed outside normal time, a pocket of the world where gods stored their mistakes. Bellerophon lost count of days. He talked to himself, to ghosts of people he had known. Sometimes he thought he heard Pegasus's wing beats, but when he looked up, only empty sky looked back. Once, he found another wanderer, a man exiled for crimes against Hera. They shared a fire for one night. By morning, the other man was dead. Even company was denied him. He buried the man. Took hours with his broken hands. It was the first useful thing he had done since his fall. The first moment that felt human rather than merely surviving. That night, he wept. Not for himself, he had exhausted those tears long ago. For the stranger. For Philono. For the children he would never see grow, for what pride had cost. The tears brought something unexpected, relief. As if poison were draining from a wound. He had done wrong, he had paid. Perhaps now he could begin to heal. He began to pray again. Not for rescue, not for Pegasus's return. Just quiet gratitude for another day of life. For the ability to feel morning sun, small. The gods, if they watched, did not answer. But something shifted in Bellerophon. The hunger for godhood had starved. In its place, simpler hungers returned, for food, for water, for human contact. He walked with more purpose now. Not toward Olympus, never again toward Olympus, but toward the edges of this wasteland. Toward wherever fate and his broken legs might lead. Months passed, or perhaps years. His hair grew white. His skin weathered to leather. But his eyes, once burning with ambition, now held something gentler. Sorrow, yes, but also wisdom. He emerged from the wasteland near a small village. The people there saw only an old beggar. They did not know they were feeding a fallen king. He did not tell them. He worked for his meals when he could, sweeping floors, mending nets, simple tasks for simple payment. The Chimera Slayer had found his final calling, survival without glory. Sometimes travelers passed through and spoke of distant Lycia, of the king who vanished, of the queen who ruled alone now, wise and kind, of princes and princesses growing strong. Philono had waited years, had searched, had sent riders to every corner of the known world. Finally, she had accepted that her husband was dead. She had mourned and moved forward. Bellerophon was glad. She deserved peace. The children deserved a mother who could look forward, not backward. He had given them enough grief. He would not add more. He did not return. What would he say? I lived. I was too ashamed to come home. Better to remain dead in their memory than alive as a failure. Years continued to pass. Bellerophon grew old in obscurity. He never spoke of his past, never claimed former glory. When asked his name, he gave a false one. Once a young man came through claiming to seek adventure. He wanted to be a hero, he said. Wanted glory and immortal fame. Bellerophon said nothing. What could he say? He watched the young man ride away toward destiny or doom. Probably doom. Most hero quests ended in unmarked graves. But perhaps this one would be different. Perhaps. That night, Bellerophon dreamed of Pegasus for the first time in years. Not escaping, not abandoning, just flying beside him as they once had, companions again, if only in sleep. He woke with tears on his cheeks. But for the first time, they were not tears of grief. He had been happy once. That happiness was not erased by how it ended. The end came quietly. A winter that his old body could not survive. A fever that burned through what remained of his strength. Villagers found him in his small hut, already still. They buried him without knowing who he was. Just another wanderer who had found his final rest. No hero's tomb, no songs, no legend, just quiet earth receiving quiet bones. But far away in Lycia, that same night, Philono woke from a dream. She had seen her husband, not young and proud, but old and peaceful, smiling. Finally, she wept, but also smiled. Somehow she knew. Wherever he had been, whatever had happened, her husband had found peace before the end. That was enough. That would have to be enough. And in the heavens, Pegasus stood among the stars. A constellation now, forever visible on clear nights. Did he remember the man who once rode him? Do immortals remember mortal friends? This was Bellerophon's story. Triumph and tragedy woven together so tightly that one cannot exist without the other. The Greeks told it for 1,000 years, and we tell it still. Not because he was perfect, he was far from perfect. Not because he won. In the end, he lost everything. We remember because his story tells a truth that every generation must relearn. There are limits, even for the gifted, even for the blessed, even for those who ride the sky itself. We are mortal, and mortality has a shape that cannot be escaped. Pegasus is up there now, in the stars, waiting for those who can see him. Bellerophon's gift to the sky, the proof that once a mortal touched the divine. beautifully. And somewhere on earth, there is a simple grave where a king lies unknown. Not punished anymore, not proud anymore, just resting, as we all must rest eventually. Let's pause here, in the quiet after the story's end. Bellerophon is gone. Pegasus shines among the stars. But the questions his myth raises, those remain very much alive. What transforms a hero into a cautionary tale? Bellerophon did nothing wrong at first. He refused temptation. He accepted exile. He fought monsters sent to kill him. Victory after victory, each one earned, each one deserved. The gods themselves helped him. Athena gave him the bridle. The fates wove triumph into his thread. What went wrong? The Greeks had a word for it. Choros, the satiation that comes from too much success. When every battle is won, the warrior forgets what losing feels like, and that forgetting is dangerous. From choros comes hubris, the pride that makes mortals compare themselves to gods. Not confidence, which is healthy. Not ambition, which drives achievement. Something blind. And from hubris comes hate, the madness of divine punishment. The moment when the gods withdraw their favor and let mortals rush toward their own destruction. Choros, hubris. The Greeks mapped this territory carefully because they walked it so often. Their heroes rose so high precisely because they fell so far. Icarus flew too close to the sun and fell when his wax wings melted. Phaethon borrowed his father's sun chariot and nearly burned the earth. Arachne challenged Athena and became a spider. Each story different in details, each the same in essence. Mortals reaching beyond mortal limits. The gods responding not with cruelty but with correction. The universe has shape, respect it. But here is what makes Bellerophon's story different from the others. He was not young and foolish like Icarus. He was not borrowing power like Phaethon. He had earned every victory. That makes his fall more frightening. Not the fall of someone who should have known better. The fall of someone who had every reason to believe he was special. Because he was special. This is why the Greeks kept telling this story, not to mock ambition, not to discourage greatness, but to remember that greatness and mortality can coexist, must coexist. The greatest heroes were not those who never fell. They were those who understood where the boundaries lay, who achieved everything possible within mortal limits, and were content. Odysseus was offered immortality by the goddess Calypso. He refused. He wanted to go home, grow old with his wife, die as a mortal. That choice made him wiser than Bellerophon. Perseus killed Medusa and rescued Andromeda, feats equal to Bellerophon's. But after his adventures, he settled down, ruled his kingdom, died in his bed. The ending Bellerophon threw away. What separates these endings? Not ability. Bellerophon matched any hero in deeds. Not divine favor. He had Athena's blessing. Something inside. Something that knew when enough was enough. Perhaps it begins in childhood. How we learn to want. What we are taught to value. Bellerophon started as a prince. Everything given, more always expected. He never learned to be satisfied. Or perhaps it was the horse itself. Imagine, having tasted flight, having touched the clouds, having seen your world shrink beneath you. How do you return to walking? The gift that elevates can also corrupt. This is one of the oldest truths in human experience. Power reveals character. Sometimes what it reveals is hunger without end. But let us be fair to Bellerophon. His hunger came from somewhere real. He had been wrongly accused, exiled, sent to die. Every victory was vindication of his innocence. When the world tries to destroy you and fails, something hardens. You begin to believe you are meant for more. That destiny itself has chosen you. The line between confidence and delusion blurs. We cannot know if Bellerophon could have chosen differently. The Greeks debated fate and free will endlessly. Whether our destruction is written or chosen, perhaps it is both. What matters for us, listening to this story in the dark, is simpler. We can see ourselves in Bellerophon. Every success that made us hungry for more. Every moment we thought we deserved heaven. The myth does not tell us to stop achieving. It tells us to check our appetites. To notice when gratitude becomes entitlement. When ambition becomes obsession. before we mount that final flight. Pegasus flies still, in the stars, in our imagination, available to all who create, who dream, who reach upward with wonder rather than grasping. The horse was never the problem. The problem was forgetting that some flights are borrowed, some gifts remain gifts. Pegasus chose Bellerophon, but Pegasus belonged to the sky. Trying to own what is loaned destroys both. Your breath is borrowed. Your heartbeat is borrowed. Your years on earth are borrowed. The Greeks knew this. Their heroes forgot. That is why we keep telling their stories. Bellerophon's bones lie in an unmarked grave somewhere. But his story, his warning, his gift to us, lives forever. In a way, he achieved immortality after all. Just not the kind he wanted. And Philono. History does not remember her much. A footnote in her husband's story. But she raised children who did not fly to Olympus. Perhaps that was her quiet triumph. Her children knew their father's story, knew how high he flew, knew how hard he fell, and they chose differently. That is what stories are for, to help us choose differently. Now let us journey deeper into this myth. Not the events which we have traced, but the world that created it. The ancient Aegean, where gods walked among mortals. 3,000 years ago, in the Bronze Age that Homer remembered, the Greeks lived in a world alive with divine presence. Every spring had its nymph, every thunder was Zeus speaking. In such a world, meeting a winged horse seemed possible. Climbing to Olympus seemed tempting. The divine was not distant. It was just up the mountain, just beyond the clouds. Corinth, Bellerophon's home city, was real. You can visit its ruins today. The spring of Perrine still flows, though no winged horses drink there anymore, as far as we know. Lycia was real too. A kingdom in what is now southwestern Turkey. Its people spoke a language we can barely read today. But they knew Bellerophon. They claimed him as their own. The Chimera had a mountain, Mount Chimera in Lycia, where natural gas vents create eternal flames. Ancient travelers saw fire coming from the earth, and knew a monster must live there. Myth grows from real soil. Real places, real fears, real hopes. The story of Bellerophon was not invented from nothing. It was assembled from the landscape the Greeks lived in. Pegasus himself may have begun as a storm god's companion. Lightning and thunder translated into hooves and wings. The horse that carries Zeus's thunderbolts across the sky. The Chimera may have begun as a volcano. Lion heat, goat mountain, serpent lava. Ancient people looking at geological violence and giving it a body they could understand. And Bellerophon. Perhaps there was a prince. Perhaps there was a warrior who did great deeds in Lycia. The name survives in Linear B tablets, Corinth's oldest writing. Over generations, the story grew. A local hero became a monster slayer. A monster slayer became a rider of divine horses. A rider became a challenger of gods. Each telling added more. By Homer's time, around 800 BCE, the story had its full shape. The poet mentioned Bellerophon in the Iliad, assumed his audience already knew the tale. It was already ancient then. Homer's Bellerophon is already tragic, wandering the Alian plain, hated by the gods, eating his own heart. The fall was part of the story from our earliest record. Later poets filled in details Homer left vague. Pindar sang of the golden bridle. Euripides wrote plays about Bellerophon's final flight. Each generation shaped the story for its own time. Euripides was bold. In his version, Bellerophon gave speeches questioning whether gods exist at all. The playwright used the myth to explore his own era's religious doubts. This is what living myths do. They adapt. They carry new meanings while preserving old forms. Bellerophon could be a lesson in humility or a voice for philosophical questioning. The Romans inherited Greek myths and made them their own. Pegasus became a symbol of poetic inspiration, the muse's horse, connecting heaven and earth, bringing divine fire to mortal minds. Medieval Christians saw Bellerophon differently. To them, he was Lucifer, the bright one who fell from heaven. Pride casting angels down, pride casting heroes down, same story, new theology. The Renaissance rediscovered Greek myths with fresh eyes. Bellerophon appeared in paintings and sculptures. his story retold as allegory for the dangers of ambition in politics and art. Each century found something new in the old story. The Romantics saw nature's vengeance on human presumption. The Victorians saw moral instruction. We see psychological insight. The myth survives because it keeps being true in new ways. Each generation that encounters it finds their own fears reflected back, their own hungers named, their own falls warned against. Now the stars themselves carry the memory. Pegasus became a constellation in ancient times, one of the 48 described by Ptolemy. Every clear night, you can see him flying. 4 bright stars form the great square of Pegasus. From there, the horse's neck and head extend toward the Milky Way, wings unfurled across light years of space. Astronomers have found planets around some of Pegasus's stars. 51 Pegasi b was the first exoplanet discovered orbiting a sun-like star. New worlds, found in the horse's outline. Perhaps one day humans will travel to those worlds. Perhaps the descendants of people who first told Bellerophon's story will live among stars that bear Pegasus's name. And perhaps, as they gaze up at unfamiliar heavens, they will remember the story. The hero who flew too high. The horse who returned to the sky. The warning that outlived empires. Back on Earth, in our present time, the myth continues working. Artists still paint Pegasus. Writers still retell Bellerophon's fall. Something in the story will not let us go. Children learn of Pegasus before they can read. The beautiful horse with wings. The creature that makes flight magical. Later, they learn the darker lessons. The wings come with weight. Corporations use Pegasus as a logo. Speed, power, aspiration made visual. They do not often mention the fall. Marketing prefers the flight to the aftermath. But the full story persists for those who seek it. In libraries and museums, in quiet conversations, in moments of reflection. The warning waits for whoever needs it. And people do need it. Every generation produces its Bellerophons. Those who achieve greatly and then overreach. Who confuse success with divinity. Who mount their own Olympus flights. The newspapers are full of such stories. The brilliant founder who believed his own myth. The star who burned too bright. The leader who thought rules applied to others. They rarely read Greek myths. They do not need to. They are living one, and the ending, as with Bellerophon, is usually visible long before it arrives. Perhaps that is why we tell stories. Not to change human nature, that seems beyond any story's power, but to give language to patterns, to make the invisible visible before it strikes. When someone whispers, "He's flying too close to the sun," they invoke Icarus. When they say, "She's becoming what she fought against," they describe tragic reversal. Stories give us vocabulary. Bellerophon's story gives us words for the particular danger of earned success. Not stolen glory like Phaethon. Not young foolishness like Icarus. Earned, deserved, genuine, and still deadly. This is perhaps the cruelest part of his myth. He did everything right and still fell. Goodness was not enough. Success was not enough. Something more was needed. That something was wisdom. The knowledge that success changes the self. That each victory must be followed by renewed humility. That gratitude requires constant renewal against the erosion of entitlement. Bellerophon stopped renewing. Stopped being grateful. Let the gifts become rights in his mind. And the mind, once poisoned, poisoned everything else. The flight to Olympus was just the symptom. How did this story survive 3,000 years? No accident preserved it. Countless generations chose to pass it down. Let us honor that chain of transmission for a moment. First came the oral poets. Men and women who memorized verses by the thousand, who sang at festivals and feasts. They carried Bellerophon in their minds, before writing existed. Then scribes wrote the stories down. On papyrus in Egypt, on parchment in Greece and Rome. Each scroll copied by hand, errors correcting some things, changing others. Medieval monks preserved what survived the empire's fall. In cold monasteries, by candlelight. Christian scribes copied pagan myths, recognizing wisdom worth saving even in unfamiliar forms. And now the story lives in books, in films, in digital archives that could survive catastrophes. Bellerophon has never been more secure, or more widely shared. The chain continues through us. As we rest here in the darkness, listening to this ancient story, we become part of that chain. You, right now, are receiving what countless generations preserved. Perhaps you will pass it on. Tell a child about Pegasus. Mention Bellerophon when someone flies too high. The myth asks only to be remembered. That is how stories survive. Let us return now to the quieter parts of the story. The moments between great events. The ordinary days that Bellerophon lived before hubris consumed him. For years after conquering the Chimera, he was simply a good king, settling disputes, building roads, ensuring the harvest was stored against famine. Unglamorous, essential work. His children grew. Isander, Hippolychus, Laodamia, names preserved in Homer's catalogue. They played in the palace gardens, while their father still knew how to be present. Philano loved him deeply. She had watched him forgive the king who tried to murder him. Had seen nobility where others might have seen a threat. She believed in his goodness. There were years, many years, when the ending was not inevitable. When Bellerophon could have lived out his days in peace. The tragedy was not written from the start. We cannot know which day he changed. Perhaps no single day, perhaps a gradual drift, so slow even he did not notice. Like a ship pulled by current while the helmsman sleeps. The stars themselves seemed to whisper. Look how high you flew. Look how far you see. Why settle for earth when you have tasted heaven? Temptation disguised as memory. He had touched the divine and survived. Had worked alongside a creature from Olympus. Had felt power that no other mortal knew. How could ordinary life compete? This is a particular danger for those who glimpse transcendence. Artists who produce one masterpiece and spend forever chasing it. Mystics who touch the infinite and cannot return to the finite. Bellerophon had reached a height few mortals achieve. And from that height, the ground looked very far away. Perhaps he forgot how to live down there anymore. But wait, let us consider another possibility. What if the story has been unfair to Bellerophon? What if his flight to Olympus was not pride but desperation? He had been wrongly accused, exiled, sent to die 3 times. Perhaps the trauma never healed. Perhaps storming Olympus was not demand but plea. Look at me, accept me, let me belong somewhere. The mortal world had rejected him once, had tried to kill him, had only accepted him after he proved himself extraordinary. What if he feared that without constant achievement, they would reject him again? Success as shield against shame. Achievement as proof of worth. The endless striving not from hunger but from fear. Fear that without the striving, nothing remains. This reading is kinder to Bellerophon. It does not excuse the flight, but explains it differently. The same action can flow from pride or wound. Perhaps both were true. Myths carry multiple meanings because humans are multiple. We are proud and wounded, ambitious and afraid, hungry for heaven and desperate for belonging, all at once. Perhaps the gods understood this. Perhaps Zeus's thunderbolt was not punishment but mercy, freeing Bellerophon from a hunger that could never be satisfied, a wound that could never heal. We cannot know what Zeus intended. The gods in Greek myths are not always consistent, not always fair, not always comprehensible. Like the universe itself, like life, what we can know is simpler. A man flew. A man fell. Somewhere between those events, something went wrong. And 3,000 years later, we still wonder what. That wondering is enough. Myths do not need to be solved. They need to be contemplated, sat with, allowed to do their slow work in the corners of the mind. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, Bellerophon drifts with you. His story settling into your dreams, perhaps, doing whatever it does in the depths where myths live. The ancient Greeks believed dreams came from the gods. That sleep opened a door to divine communication. What will you dream tonight, having heard this story? Perhaps you will fly. Perhaps in your sleep Pegasus will carry you, higher and higher, until you see what Bellerophon saw. The golden towers, the gathering clouds, the choice. And in your dream, perhaps you will choose differently. Turn back, descend. Return to the world where love waits, where children call your name, where mortality means everything matters. Or perhaps you will understand, in the safety of sleep, why Bellerophon did not turn back, feel the pull, know the hunger, and forgive him. Forgiveness might be the deepest purpose of the myth. Not warning against hubris, that is the surface. Beneath, an invitation to understand the pride that destroys, to recognize it in ourselves. We have all flown too high in some way, wanted too much, reached beyond our grasp. Bellerophon is not other. Bellerophon is the part of us that will not accept limits. And we are also Philano, watching someone we love destroy themselves. Unable to stop them. Only able to love them through the fall. That grief, too, is in the story. And we are Pegasus. The gift that cannot stop itself from being misused. The talent corrupted by the hands that hold it. The innocent beauty drawn into tragedy. We are even Zeus, sometimes, required to draw boundaries, to say no, to bring down those we might have helped, because help has become harm. The myth contains all of these roles because life requires us to play all of them, sometimes in the same day. We are never just one character, we are the whole story. This is what makes mythology different from history. History tells us what happened. Mythology tells us what is always happening. The particular becomes universal. Bellerophon fell once. We fall constantly, small falls, recoverable falls, falls that teach. The myth shows us the pattern, so we recognize it when we live it. Before we reach the end, let us trace how Bellerophon's shadow falls across our modern world. The myth did not stop working when Greece fell. It adapted and continued. Every story of the brilliant innovator who could not stop innovating carries Bellerophon's DNA. The founder who builds an empire and then burns it by overreaching. We see it constantly. The artist who cannot top their early masterpiece and destroys themselves trying. The athlete who cannot accept decline. The leader who confuses their office with their self. All Bellerophons. Psychology has given us new names for old patterns. Narcissistic inflation, God complex. Imposter syndrome's evil twin. The certainty that you are exceptional. The sickness that looks like health. But the myth also offers hope. Bellerophon at the end found peace. Learned to be small again. Was stripped of glory and discovered that survival remained. Perhaps that is the hidden treasure. Now we approach the myth's deepest teaching. Not the warning against hubris, we have heard that. Something quieter. Something that waits behind all the thunder. The teaching is this: we are mortal. That is not a curse. That is what makes everything matter. Bellerophon forgot. In reaching for infinity, he lost the finite, which was everything. His wife was mortal. His love was mortal. His children were mortal. That should have been enough. For most people it is enough. But Bellerophon wanted what cannot be wanted: immortality. The word means not death. But what is life without death? An endless day with no night. A meal that never ends. A song with no silence between the notes. The gods themselves in Greek myth envied mortals sometimes, because mortal love is braver, knowing it ends. Mortal joy is sweeter, knowing it passes. We have what they cannot. Bellerophon had this. Had the sweet, brave, passing beauty of mortal life. Had love that dared to exist knowing death would end it. And he threw it away for stone towers in the clouds. The stone towers were real. Olympus exists in the Greek cosmos. But immortality is not life expanded, it is life frozen. The gods do not love the way mortals love. They cannot. So the myth's deepest teaching is a paradox. In accepting mortality, we gain what immortals lack. In embracing limits, we find the limitless. The gate to heaven is contentment with earth. Bellerophon learned this. Too late, but he learned. In his years of wandering, stripped of glory, he found something he never had on the throne. Presence, attention to now. When you have lost everything, you discover what remains, and what remains is this breath, this heartbeat, this moment of being alive. The simplest things, which contain everything. Perhaps that is why Zeus let him live. Not for punishment, but for possibility. The chance to discover what pride had hidden. The treasure he had walked past his whole life. And now, 3,000 years later, the myth passes this treasure to you. The knowledge that enough is enough. That here is enough. That you, as you are enough. You do not need to fly to Olympus. You do not need to slay monsters to deserve love. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. The myth gives you permission to rest. So rest. Let the story settle. Let Bellerophon's fall become a blessing, the warning that lets you avoid his path, the tragedy that teaches without requiring you to live it. Pegasus flies still, in the stars, in dreams, in the human imagination that will never stop reaching upward. But reaching upward does not require leaving where you stand. You can wonder at the stars without storming heaven. You can dream of flight without abandoning the ground. You can be mortal and magnificent, limited and limitless, here in reaching both. Always both. We have traveled far tonight, through ancient Corinth and Lycia, through fire and sky, through fall and wandering. Now let us gather the symbols and see what they reveal. The golden bridle, Athena's gift. A tool for controlling what cannot naturally be controlled. Think about what that means. Divine help to harness divine power. But harness is not own. The bridle let Bellerophon guide Pegasus, not possess him. The moment he forgot the difference. The moment guidance became ownership in his mind. The gift became a curse. Every gift in our lives carries this danger. Talent, beauty, intelligence, luck. They are bridles, not horses. They let us ride what we cannot own. The confusion destroys. Pegasus himself is the clearest symbol. The winged horse. The creature that unites earth and sky, mortal and divine, the possible and impossible, inspiration made flesh. When inspiration comes, we feel like we are flying. Ideas arrive that seem beyond our ordinary capacity. We touch something larger than ourselves. This is the Pegasus experience. But inspiration visits. It does not move in. Pegasus drinks at the spring and flies away. The muses touch us and withdraw. We cannot make transcendence permanent, and should not try. The chimera, fire-breathing multi-headed monstrous, represents the challenges that seem impossible. The obstacles that have defeated everyone before us. The fears that breathe fire. Bellerophon slew his chimera. That part of the story tells us impossible challenges can be overcome, with divine help, clever thinking, and the courage to engage what others flee. But killing the monster was not the end. It was, in fact, the beginning of the real danger. Success awakened something worse than any external beast, the monster within. Zeus and his thunderbolt represent the ultimate limit. The boundary that exists whether we acknowledge it or not. The ceiling that cannot be broken, only crashed against. We all have a Zeus in our lives. Not a punisher, a limit. The walls of our nature, the boundaries of our gifts, the finite space of our mortal span. Wisdom knows the walls. The Elean plain, barren, forgotten outside of time, is where we wander when we have lost everything. Every myth needs such a place, a wilderness for stripping away illusion. We fear such places. The depression that strips meaning, the failure that takes identity, the illness that reduces us to basics. But the myth suggests these wildernesses can heal. Bellerophon entered the plain proud and broken. He left it humble and whole, or at least more whole than before. Some healing requires destruction first. Some building requires clearing. And Philono, often forgotten in tellings of the myth, represents what waits at home. The love that does not require us to be heroes. The embrace that accepts us fallen. Bellerophon never returned to that embrace. That is his tragedy. The love was there. The home was there. He chose wandering instead. We can choose differently. The symbols weave together into a single message. Be grateful for gifts. Face your monsters. Respect your limits. Survive your wildernesses. Return to love. Lifelong practice. 3,000 years of human voices have carried this message forward. It must matter, or it would have been forgotten. It must be true, or it would not still resonate. Now the message passes to you. What you do with it is yours to choose. But the myth has done its work. It has planted seeds. What grows from them will unfold in its own time. Why does this myth endure? Why, of all the stories ancient Greece told, has Bellerophon's flight and fall echoed through 30 centuries, to reach you tonight. Perhaps because every generation produces people who fly too high. Every era sees greatness corrupted by pride. The pattern repeats so reliably that we need stories to name it. Or perhaps because Pegasus is simply unforgettable. The winged horse, impossible and beautiful, speaks to something in us that wants to believe flight is possible, even for earthbound creatures. Pegasus has become more famous than Bellerophon himself. The horse appears on coins, logos, flags, and constellations. The rider is often forgotten. Perhaps that too is fitting. The myth compares to Icarus, who also flew and fell. But Icarus was young and disobedient, a child ignoring his father. Bellerophon was accomplished and deliberate, an adult choosing wrong. Icarus warns the young, listen to wisdom, respect your inexperience. Bellerophon warns the accomplished, success does not make you invulnerable. Achievement does not make you divine. Modern psychology might call it success syndrome or hubris hypothesis. We have scientific names now, but the Greeks had it first, written in fire and feathers and falling heroes. In our age of billionaire rocketeers and Silicon Valley disruptors, Bellerophon's story feels urgently contemporary. Those who reach highest often understand limits least. But the myth does not only warn, it also comforts. It says you are not alone in your struggles with pride. Humans have wrestled this demon forever. It comes with being human, and it offers hope. Bellerophon found peace eventually. The fall was not the end. Even after the worst mistakes, life continued. Healing happened. That hope is part of the legacy too. And now, the story draws to its close. The fire that lit our telling burns lower. The stars wheel slowly overhead. Pegasus among them, patient and eternal. You have traveled far tonight. From Corinth to Lycia, through fire and sky, through triumph and fall. Now it is time to let the journey rest, to let yourself rest. The Mediterranean night is gentle. Warm breezes carry the scent of olive groves and sea salt. Somewhere waves lap against ancient shores, keeping time with your breath. Above, the Pegasus constellation keeps watch. The same stars that ancient Greeks saw. The same wings spread across the darkness. You rest beneath the same sky. Let the myth settle into your dreams. Let Bellerophon find his peace, and you find yours. The story will be here when you wake. Stories always wait for those who need them. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. The day's concerns drift away like clouds crossing the moon. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing you need to be. The golden bridle has been set aside. The winged horse grazes in starlight meadows. No flights tonight, no challenges. Only rest, only the gentle dark, only peace. Sleep now, traveler. You have heard an ancient story and made it yours. Tomorrow brings its own journeys. Tonight brings only rest, deep, healing, well-earned rest. The gods watch over sleeping mortals. They always have. Since the first human closed their eyes beneath the stars, divine protection has wrapped the night in safety. Good night. May your dreams carry you gently. May you wake refreshed, remembering only what serves you. And may Pegasus, in some quiet corner of your sleep, spread his wings and remind you, you can always fly.